unfiled.
What's your emergency?
It's not an emergency. Well, it could be. When I rang the bell and there was no answer, and I thought,
Nobody's answering the house?
well, not yesterday. I called this morning, and all I'm getting is an answer machine, and I was just hoping that somebody would...
You know what? Let me give you the state police.
It was a cold, gray November morning in 2001. In a quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood, something felt off. A neighbor stood by her window, pacing, watching, waiting. She finally picked up the phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling. Ben Amato's porch light had been on for days, she explained. The curtains hadn't moved, no footsteps, no laughter, just silence. When the police arrived, they stepped out into the chilled morning air. Their boots crunched on frost-covered leaves as they approached Ben's small house with caution. They knocked once, twice. "Mr. Amato, it's the police." Silence. They called out again, but only the wind answered, rustling the trees, carrying a faint smell they couldn't quite place. As they stepped inside, the air was thick, heavy. The house felt eerily still, like it was holding its breath. That's when they noticed it. A strong, unmistakable odor seeping from the basement door. The officers exchanged a look, hands hovering near their holsters. One of them called out one last time, "Mr. Amato, are you down there?" Silence. Slowly, they opened the basement door. The hinges groaned like a warning. They descended the creaking steps, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Halfway down, a beam of light caught something on the floor. A man, face down, lying in a pool of dark, dried blood at the bottom of the stairs. It was Ben Amato. At first glance, it looked like a tragic accident, a man who had fallen down the stairs and struck his head. But as the police stood there, flashlight beams trembling ever so slightly, they knew. There was more to this scene than met the eye. Ben had been dead for 5 days, and soon the truth of how he died would reveal something far darker than a fall. This was no accident. This was murder. There were signs. Traces of pepper spray found on Ben's face, splattered across the walls at the top of the stairs. And Ben hadn't died from the fall. He had been beaten, repeatedly, on the head with a large cylindrical object. But perhaps the most telling clue was a single boot print, found at the bottom of the stairs. Someone had stepped in Ben's blood and tracked it across the basement floor. As detectives processed the scene, the truth began to take shape, and suspicion started to point in one direction, toward a woman named Cheryl Kunkle. Ben's stepdaughter was one of the first to speak up. She knew the history between Ben and Cheryl, a history that was complicated, volatile. She knew Ben had been fighting his way out of a long battle with depression, and that a child custody hearing was just weeks away. Then came something even more chilling. Judge Debbie York, who had presided over Cheryl's harassment case against Ben, remembered a moment in court. Cheryl's voice had echoed across the room as she shouted, "What do I have to do to get him to leave me alone? Do I have to fucking kill him?"
What do I have to do for him to leave me alone? Do I have to fucking kill him?
At the time, it might have sounded like frustration, but now it sounded like a warning. Cheryl Kunkle was born in 1969. She grew up in the Pocono Mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. Her father ran a junkyard, dealing in scrap metal and reusable car parts. This upbringing shaped Cheryl. It gave her a rough exterior. She became a tomboy, playing baseball, working on cars, riding motorcycles, as tough as any man in their small town. She was a hard worker, taking on manual labor jobs that many would consider men's work: welding, construction, driving forklifts. Eventually, she started her own paving business, laying blacktop across the county. It was successful enough to buy her a house and a Mercedes. Ben Amato had moved to the Poconos in the mid-90s. He was retired from the New York Sanitation Department. One day, while rummaging through Cheryl's father's junkyard for car parts, he met Cheryl. She saw something in Ben. Stability. She began to flirt with him. Ben, nearly 20 years older, was receptive. Soon, they started dating. Ben was excited to have a younger woman so interested in him, and he got along well with Cheryl's 12-year-old son, Greg. Over the months, Ben showered Greg with gifts, and Cheryl with even more expensive ones. Their relationship reached a pivotal point when Cheryl discovered she was pregnant with Ben's child. But when she told Ben, his reaction was not what she expected. It wasn't that he didn't want a child, but Ben was struggling. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, depression, and he was still grieving the recent death of his father. He worried about passing on his mental health struggles, about the future. This uncertainty deeply upset Cheryl. She made a swift, decisive choice. She ended the relationship. She planned to keep the child, but raise it on her own, without Ben. Cheryl broke off all contact. Ben spiraled into a profound depression. The devastation wasn't just from losing Cheryl, but from the gut-wrenching prospect of losing a son he would never meet. The once happy, easygoing man became reclusive, hiding his feelings from friends and family. In November 1998, Cheryl gave birth to their son.
What's the baby's last name?
She gave him the surname
Kunkle.
Kunkle instead of Amato. Meanwhile, Ben sought help, therapy, medication. But a year later, he attempted suicide and failed. He tried again the following year. His friends and family grew desperate, fearing for his life. But over time, Ben began to emerge from his depression. He decided he would fight Cheryl for custody of their son. But Cheryl, just as she had done with Greg's first father, Jeffrey Rowe, aggressively denied Ben any contact with the child. Then, she took it further, filing harassment charges against Ben before the custody hearing, hoping it would discredit him in court. She claimed that Ben was stalking her simply because he wanted to see his son. The judge saw through Cheryl's claims. Just because he drives past your house, the judge said, doesn't mean he's stalking you. And that's when it happened. In open court, Cheryl Kunkle's true chilling intent surfaced. She startled everyone by blurting out, "What do I have to do to get him to leave me alone? Do I have to fucking kill him?" Cheryl would later claim it was set on a whim, but the investigation that followed would reveal she wasn't joking. Despite the suspicions and Cheryl's alarming outburst, detectives had a problem. They lacked direct physical evidence connecting her to Ben's murder. The bloody boot print at the scene didn't match any of Cheryl's known work boots. For 2 long years, the case remained unsolved. A lingering mystery hanging over the quiet Pennsylvania community. Yet one detail continued to haunt investigators. Just 3 months before Ben's death, Cheryl had filed a burglary charge against a man named Nathaniel Evans. And then, without explanation, she dropped the charges. Why? That question would lead investigators down a dark, unexpected path. The withdrawal of the burglary charge continued to nag at detectives, so they dug deeper. Nathaniel Evans, the man Cheryl had accused, had since been arrested on an unrelated charge. He was already in jail at the time of Ben Amato's death. He couldn't have committed the murder, but his connection to Cheryl and that dropped charge warranted questioning. Detectives met with Nate Evans in jail. They sat him down and asked a direct question. "Do you know why we're here?" Nate's reply was immediate and shocking. "Yeah," he said. "You're here about us getting paid by that lady to kill that dude." Nate Evans and his girlfriend, April Steinhauser, both told the same story. Cheryl Kunkle had paid them to murder Ben Amato, but they never intended to go through with it. Their true plan was to steal Cheryl's money. They used the cash to buy bicycles for April's daughters. The rest went to drugs and alcohol. This new information, while not directly linking Cheryl to Ben's murder, was enough. Detectives moved in. Cheryl Kunkle was arrested, charged with solicitation to commit murder. She spent months in jail, before eventually posting bail and walking out, awaiting trial. For the next year and a half, detectives meticulously built their case against Cheryl. They hoped more evidence would surface, enough to finally charge her with Ben Amato's murder. A murder charge would indeed come, but it would arise from a source no one saw coming. On the evening of May 4th, 2004, Kathleen, the mother of a 17-year-old Kristen Fisher, pulled into her driveway around 5:30 p.m. She opened the garage door, and what she saw froze her in place. Her daughter, Kristen, was lying on the cold garage floor. Around Kristen's neck, a thin, white rope, tied into a loose noose, hanging from the garage door opener rails. An overturned stool lay nearby. Frantically, Kathleen ran to her daughter, but it was too late. Kristen's body was cold. Kathleen's mind raced. She tore through the house, calling out for her 7-month-old granddaughter, Kaylee. Room to room, nothing. The silence was crushing. No cries, no sounds. Had someone taken Kaylee? Then Kathleen opened the door to the downstairs bathroom and collapsed to her knees. There, in the half-filled bathtub, face down, was Kaylee Elizabeth Fisher, lifeless. A 911 call was made, reporting the unimaginable. When police arrived, it was clear something was wrong. It looked like a murder-suicide, but the evidence told another story. The noose around Kristen's neck was loose, far too loose to have caused her death. The tops of her feet were dirty, but the bottoms were clean. She had been dragged into the garage. An autopsy would confirm it. Kristen hadn't been hanged. She had been strangled. The details didn't fit suicide. Kristen usually wore sweatpants around the house, but today she was dressed in her street clothes. Her diaper bag was packed, as if she was preparing to leave. This wasn't the behavior of someone about to harm her child or herself. This scene had been staged, and the truth was far darker than anyone in that quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood could have imagined. As police began to question neighbors, one neighbor recalled something: a Honda Civic. Parked in front of Kristen Fisher's house that day, he hadn't recognized the vehicle. It looked out of place, out of rhythm with the quiet street. But this neighbor had the foresight to write down the license plate. When police ran the plate, the registration came back, jointly registered to Greg Rowe and Cheryl Kunkle. The name Greg Rowe was familiar to investigators. He was Cheryl's son from a prior relationship, 17 years old, living with his mother and his younger half-brother. His connection immediately raised questions, not just because of the car, but because his mother, Cheryl Kunkle, was out on bail, awaiting trial for solicitation to commit the murder of Ben Amato. Police arrived at Greg's home with a warrant. Cheryl, already under the shadow of a murder-for-hire charge, was furious as police rummaged through her house. When she tried to enter the garage, detectives warned her to stay away from the Honda Civic. But Cheryl ignored them. Brazen, defiant. She claimed she just wanted to grab some CDs from the car, but investigators believed she was trying to hide evidence. Cheryl Kunkle was immediately arrested for hindering apprehension, obstructing justice, tampering with evidence. This new arrest had immediate consequences. Her bail for the murder-for-hire charge was revoked. Cheryl was sent back to jail. As reporters watched her walk in,
Granddaughter,
one
that's not
shouted
my
asking how she
granddaughter. My
felt
son
about
was
her
wearing a
granddaughter's
condom,
death.
and the
Cheryl's
birth date
reply
of that
was
baby
chilling,
does not make
defiant.
sense.
Granddaughter? That's not my granddaughter. My son was wearing a condom, and the birth date does not make sense. With Cheryl back behind bars, the focus of the double homicide investigation shifted to her son, Greg Rowe. Police had found the Civic parked outside Kristen Fisher's house on the day of the murders. During the search of the Kunkle home, investigators seized Greg's computer. They were hoping to find emails between Greg and Kristen, something that might explain their troubled relationship. But what they found was far more disturbing. The computer contained a cache of child pornography. 7 photos, 2 videos, This discovery led to new charges against Greg Rowe. 9 counts of sexual abuse of children, 9 counts of criminal attempt at dissemination. Despite the gravity of these charges, Greg posted $10,000 bail and was released. But he remained the prime suspect in the brutal murders of Kristen and her baby, Kaylee. Over the following weeks, detectives meticulously pieced together Kristen Fisher's final days. They interviewed her friends, her family. They uncovered a chilling detail. A friend claimed that just days before her death, Greg had left Kristen a voicemail threatening to kill her if she didn't drop the child support lawsuit. While investigators were unable to retrieve the actual voicemail, telephone records independently confirmed that Rowe had indeed placed a call to Kristen that day. The neighbor's crucial eyewitness account of Greg's Honda Civic at the crime scene provided significant corroboration. But the most damning piece of evidence, one that would directly link Greg Rowe to the method of murder, emerged from an unexpected source, an employee at a nearby True Value hardware store. This employee claimed that, on the very day of the murders, Greg Rowe had come into the store and purchased a bundle of thin white rope, the same type of rope found around Kristen's neck. Greg Rowe's freedom did not last long. Little more than a month after his initial release, the accumulating evidence was undeniable. He was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of third-degree murder, possessing instruments of crime, and endangering the welfare of children. If convicted, Rowe now faced the gravest possible consequence: the death penalty. Rowe vehemently insisted he did not kill his ex-girlfriend and daughter, but under the weight of the evidence and facing the ultimate punishment, he made a shocking claim. He knew who did, and he claimed he could prove it. What Greg Rowe revealed next sent a ripple of disbelief and renewed horror through the investigation, connecting the recent double homicide directly to the cold case of Ben Amato. He laid out a detailed account for the prosecution, a narrative that implicated his own mother in the brutal killing that had remained unsolved for years. Rowe claimed that 2 months before Ben Amato's murder, he and his mother went to a sporting goods store. There, Cheryl instructed her then 15-year-old son to go inside and purchase a can of bear repellent. This bear repellent, investigators would later confirm, was the very pepper spray found on Ben's face and on the walls of the stairwell where he was found dead. Then, on the day Ben Amato was murdered, November 12, 2001, Greg, despite being only 15, drove his mother to Ben's house. He explained that he regularly drove Cheryl around. He knew his mother and Ben were embroiled in a child custody dispute, and Cheryl had explicitly instructed him to drive her to Ben's home. When they reached the house, Greg dropped her off. Cheryl then told him to drive about a mile away and wait for 2 hours. After the 2 hours had passed, Greg returned to the house to pick up his mother. He told prosecutors he had no idea what she had done at the time. Cheryl, however, was visibly excited, seemingly in an adrenaline rush. She instructed him to take the back roads on the way home. Greg recounted that his mother climbed into the back seat of the car, removed her clothes, and threw them out the window as they drove through the rural roads. She also discarded a blood-stained baseball bat out the window. When Greg asked his mother what she had done, Cheryl Kunkle confessed. I killed him, she stated simply. She described how she sprayed Ben with a pepper spray at the top of the stairs, then repeatedly beat him with the baseball bat. As he stumbled down the stairs, she continued her assault as he tried to fight her off. When he finally landed at the bottom, she continued to pummel his head until he was dead. Greg told detectives he was furious with his mother upon learning the truth. He was only 15 at the time, and he had liked Ben. I felt it was my fault. I cried and went to my bedroom, he recounted. 2 days later, Cheryl began to have second thoughts about her decision to discard her clothes and the murder weapon. She told Greg to go back and find them. Greg, however, claimed he wanted no part in covering up Ben's murder. He lied to his mother, telling her he couldn't find the items. She later approached another friend, Jerry Terleski, to whom she had also admitted the murder, seeking his help. Jerry also refused. Frustrated, Cheryl drove through the back roads on her own, found the items, brought them home, and burned them. Investigators largely believed Greg Rowe's detailed account of Ben Amato's murder. His testimony provided crucial missing pieces to a cold case that had haunted them for years. However, they remained skeptical of his claims that Cheryl also killed Kristen and Kaylee. Too many pieces of evidence in that recent double homicide pointed directly at Greg. His car had been parked outside Kristen's house, he had made death threats to Kristen, and he had purchased the very same type of rope found around Kristen's neck. During Greg Rowe's trial for the murders of Kristen and Kaylee, a key witness emerged, his new girlfriend, Rachel Shevelson. Her testimony would further unravel Greg's attempts to deflect blame. She told the court that just 2 days before the murders, Greg had asked her to search the internet for instructions on how to tie a hangman's noose. Rachel also revealed that Greg had sent her letters from prison, explicitly telling her to remember 3 things during her testimony. He wanted her to lie for him, to claim he bought the rope only at his mother's request, and that his mother had referred to Kristen as business you should have taken care of yourself. Lastly, he instructed her to testify that it was his mother, not himself, who had asked for the instructions on tying the noose. Rachel told the court that Greg repeatedly threatened her, stating that if she didn't say these things, his mother would kill her. Greg's defense team, seizing on his desperate confession, attempted to shift the blame for the Kristen and Kaylee killings entirely onto Cheryl. But the jury was not convinced. In January 2006, after 6 days of testimony and over 5 hours of deliberation, Greg Rowe was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of third-degree murder. He now faced the grim prospect of the death penalty. With the jury's verdict delivered, Greg Rowe, now a convicted double murderer, faced the possibility of the death penalty. During the sentencing phase, an emotional plea was made by a man Greg had only recently reconciled with, his father, Jeffrey Rowe. Jeffrey addressed the court, pleading for his son's life. He revealed that he had had no contact with Greg for years, and they were only just beginning to get to know each other again. "I know my son didn't do this," Jeffrey told the court. "Please don't take him from me. I know 2 innocent lives were lost, but taking his life won't make it right." Greg himself also pleaded with the jury, stating, "I wanted to make my family proud of me. I know it's your opinion I did this, but I honestly tell you I didn't. Please don't take me from my family." Ultimately, Greg Rowe's pleas were unsuccessful. He was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. The following year, in 2007, Greg Rowe was allowed outside of prison walls, but only for one critical purpose: to testify against his mother at her trial. Wearing handcuffs, leg restraints, and a black suit, Rowe took the stand, testifying for 2 hours. He reiterated to the court that Cheryl had admitted to him she killed Ben Amato, and that he had driven her to and from Ben's home on the day of the murder. He further claimed that his mother had threatened him, telling him that if police ever looked into her, she would implicate him as an accomplice, taking him down with her. Greg Rowe's testimony was not the only damning evidence against Cheryl Kunkle. Ben Amato's attorney and personal friend testified, recounting how Ben had repeatedly told him, "If I'm found dead, Cheryl did it." Judge Debbie York, who had presided over Cheryl's harassment suit against Ben, took the stand to recount Cheryl's chilling death threat outburst in her courtroom. At the time of Ben's murder, Cheryl had been having an affair with a married police officer named Marty Reynolds. Reynolds also testified against her, telling the court that Cheryl had admitted to him that she killed Ben, even stating, "We fought all the way down the stairs." She reportedly showed him bruises on her thighs from the struggle, only to then deny everything minutes later, claiming the bruises were from a motorcycle accident. Reynolds described Cheryl as cuckoo, someone who would say something 1 minute and then backtrack a minute later. His decision to withhold evidence about the murder cost Reynolds dearly. He was forced to resign from the police department after almost 10 years. His pension was revoked and his wife divorced him. Cheryl's close friend, Jerry Terleski, a mason who worked for her father, also testified. He corroborated that Cheryl had tried to get him to help find the baseball bat she had thrown out of the car window, and that he later watched her burn the bat in her clothes. April Steinhauser also took the stand, reaffirming that Cheryl had paid her and Nate Evans to murder Ben. Cheryl's defense admitted a cassette tape into evidence, purporting to be a conversation between her and April. However, the prosecution argued the conversation was clearly staged, ultimately making Cheryl appear even more guilty. The defense attempted to argue that Cheryl's past statements were made out of anger and frustration, and that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on questionable testimony from less than upstanding witnesses, rather than conclusive forensic evidence. They also pointed out the lack of blood in Cheryl's car if she changed clothes there, and the lack of a bitter custody dispute for motivation. Despite the defense's arguments, there was little doubt of Cheryl's guilt. In February 2007, the jury returned its verdict. As the forewoman stated, guilty to each charge: first-degree murder, solicitation to commit murder, aggravated assault, burglary, and tampering with evidence. Cheryl Kunkle doubled over, then sat with her face in her hands, shaking her head and sobbing. "No," Kunkle whispered repeatedly. Ben Amato's stepdaughters, Erin Stanger-Guth and Peggy Bowman, embraced each other, tears of relief streaming down their faces. "I'm extremely happy," Stanger-Guth said afterward. "But things won't change for me. I still won't have a dad tomorrow. He'll still be gone because of her." 4 months later, Cheryl Kunkle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she prepared to leave the courtroom, Ben's stepdaughters addressed her directly. "The prison you will be transferred to will have lots of prisoners like you. When you look into those many evil eyes, may you finally see what my stepfather saw just before he took his last breath." Ben's daughter added poignantly, "Last Sunday was Father's Day, and instead of taking my dad to dinner or having him over for a barbecue, I was sitting at a grave telling him Happy Father's Day and kissing a cold picture on a headstone." As Cheryl left the courtroom, reporters asked her how she felt about spending the rest of her life in prison. Her reply was characteristic: "I don't intend to." In subsequent interviews from prison, Cheryl Kunkle still claims her innocence, a chilling testament to a woman convicted of orchestrating and carrying out a brutal murder, and whose life was tragically intertwined with yet another, equally horrific family crime.
In true crime, some cases remain
unfiled.